Hey all, Grello here. I'm a little late on this one. I overlooked that they were going to do this. This is Star Citizen Live, a Q&A session on Genesis and Architect. This came out on the heels of the last ISC that we watched about meshing and performance. But these are really important tools, Genesis and StarArchitect. And they'll be directly responsible for creating like that immersive environment that we all want as part of Star Citizen, one that we can explore and it makes sense and there's like continuity there. So this is definitely worth watching. Since I'm late, I'm going to assume a lot of people have already watched this. So I'm going to include the whole video here in case you haven't and you want to watch the whole thing with me. But I'm also going to include links in the description to the time stamps that I actually have something to say in case you just want to jump around and just watch those bits. And maybe I'll also figure out chapters. I haven't done that yet on YouTube, so we'll see if I actually figure that out. You'll know if there's chapters in the video whenever I publish this. So let's go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Star Citizen Live. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour at the end of our week and we invite our CIG developers here and we talk about all kinds of things. Sometimes we explore the process of their work. Sometimes we just get to know them a bit personally. And on shows like this, a Q&A show, we collect questions from you, the Star Citizen backer, and pose them directly to our developers. So on this week's show, we are following up to the Brave New Worlds StarEngine and Genesis presentation from this year's CitizenCon. So we have a few select members. We couldn't fit everybody on the show this week, but we have a few select members from the teams that contributed to that presentation on to answer your questions. So without further ado, let's get into it and meet who we got on the show this week. We'll start with Ali. Ali, tell everybody who you are, what you do for Star Citizen.
Hi, I'm Ali Brown. I'm Senior Director of Pixels and Planets. And that's it, really. I look after about 20 developers who are responsible for all things graphics, VFX, and planet related.
Did you get them to actually change the title to include pixels, or are you being fun?
No, that's what I've been using on Spectrum. It's a lot easier to say.
All right. Will, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Will. I'm a Senior Engine Programmer on the Planet Tech team. I make planets and occasionally water and rivers and stuff, and it's great fun.
Okay. And you have a nickname amongst the community, don't you?
Oh, I certainly do. Water Guy. Even though I should be Planet Guy, really.
Water Guy. All right, there it is in the chat. Up next, Seb.
Water Boy would be funnier.
Hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm with the Planet Content team, and I make tools and planets and content for them, I guess.
Okay. What's the
like
what's the difference between tools and content?
Like Will and Ali, they make the magic sauce, and we make the ingredients that goes into that, and then we get planets out of it. Like, yeah, all the stones and all the plants and the data that drives the systems and all of that is from us. And yeah, we get the nice tech to make it work.
That works. I just wanted to hear you say magic sauce. And Graham, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, I'm Graham Phillipson. I'm Director of Audio Technology. So basically we take all these stunning visuals that all these guys create and we try to make them look even better by supporting them with audio.
We have to be real careful about switching from Seb to Graham because it goes from dark to light. It's like, ah! Seb, say something.
Join me on the dark side? I don't know.
All right. So on the show this week, like we said, we're doing follow-up questions from the Brave New Worlds and StarEngine and Genesis presentation. Earlier this week, we put up a thread on Spectrum, which is our bespoke communication platform available on robertspaceindustriescom. We let you guys submit your questions, vote up which ones you wanted to see answered most. Then we let our four guests here loose on the thread, and they collected the ones that they were most capable of talking about now. As is always the case in game development, things that are much further out are a little too subject to change. So we do try to keep our questions and our
Spoke communications platform. I always struggle to explain to other gamers like what Spectrum is. I'll have to remember that. Spoke communications platform.
conversation related to within the next year of content. So most of what we're talking about today will be related to the next year and possibly the year after that, depending on specific little elements here. So keep that in mind when wondering why we're choosing certain questions over other questions, and let's get to it. Our first question,
Here we go.
maybe this is for Seb, we'll see. It says, will Genesis allow you to create more alien-looking biomes and worlds using the Earth-like biomes as a base?
Yeah, I guess it's more like a content side question than like a tech limitation. Genesis never, like Planetech never really limited us in terms of what we can do. It's more like, yeah, what we do on the content side and making it realistic. Obviously, we've made a really nice progress already towards getting closer to what Earth and nature has to offer. It's always our primary target and goal, just so it's just because it's familiar and yeah, it's a really great reference point. And now we're really looking forward to doing more alien things and adding things that make it feel less familiar and just different, but without going into the uncanny valley kind of thing. So it's a balancing act, but we have a nice baseline now, and now we just go from that and make it more and better and alien, and yeah.
Do you,
That makes sense to me. It being a content question, like the tools like Genesis and StarArchitect, I mean, they're going to be responsible for like making decisions on like how like a river cuts into the ground, or how continents come together, or how whatever emerges. But it's really the graphics and the imagery that will make things look Earth-like or alien-like, or so.
do you think we'll eventually get to something that's just completely unrecognizable, something far more? I'm thinking like Felucia in Star Wars or something, where it's all a bunch of magentas and neon blues and stuff like that. Just a completely alien world. Is that something we're working towards?
It's definitely, we've tried this in the past. Actually, Hurston was meant to be like blue trees in the beginning. Then we
That's right.
iterated onto it, and it ended up being more or less Africa now. But yeah, we'll definitely try that again and again until we get it right. But it has to feel good and feel believable and make for a nice experience to be in the place. But it's definitely on the road map to possibly be a thing.
Okay. Next question. What we saw during the panel was impressive. I agree. But could we hear more about how these tools have quantifiably made planet generation faster and of higher quality?
Well, quantifiable is a weird word here because we're not done. So we haven't measured how long it takes to make a planet because we can't make a whole planet yet. But the design and the whole way that we've built this tech is with speed of iteration and quality in mind. We're already getting quantifiably better quality in areas, and we want to keep working until all of the areas are of a higher quality as well. But also, we can't kind of measure how quick all this will be until it's done, until all the supporting systems are done. So just because we can pump out a planet in a day doesn't necessarily mean we can work out everything else that makes that planet an interesting and unique location. That requires content from all sorts of other things, from narrative to level design to locations to lore. There's no point pumping out a million alien worlds that are all lifeless. They've got to have meaning, and that's kind of what we've done really nicely with Pyro, I think.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Oh, go ahead, Ali.
I was going to say, just to clarify, we're also not going to be pumping out a planet in a day or a million planets, though.
Certainly not.
I mean, it's as long as a piece of string, isn't it? You could pump out something in a day, whether it's of the, worthy of releasing in a day would be a very different question.
Right. No,
I would love to get some more details here. They're being a little obtuse, but like it makes sense, like what they're saying around like there being many channels that lead to the finished product of a planet, actually generating the planet, and the like the physical characteristics is just one of those channels. Narrative, design, aesthetics, graphics, visuals, sounds, like all that are going to be like kind of separate channels, I would imagine, and they all kind of lead to a finished product like Pyro 4 or whatever. What you really want to do is take each of those channels and work on shortening how much time you need to invest into that channel to produce the outcome. So like it may be that right now the generating the physical characteristics of the planet is like the longest channel, and like all the other work streams involved in producing that planet are kind of spend the most time waiting on that channel. So then it would make sense to invest time in shortening that work stream or channel so that the other ones are waiting less time. But eventually, like if you improve it enough, you're going to get to the point where that's no longer the one that is really being weighted on the most. Now you're waiting on something else, and then you're going to have to target that one, shorten that one, and so on and so forth until you're kind of optimizing how long it would take to produce one of these things. This is similar to other projects and characteristics.
Will, I really like your answer. Basically, there's what the tools can do, but there's still so many more aspects that go into creating a planet at the scale and fidelity of Star Citizen. So the Genesis tools and everything will streamline one
Missions,
aspect
cultures.
of that, but as you point out, there is still narrative, there is still creature creation, there's all these
Factions.
other things that make a planet thrive. So we won't know how fast this improves the process until we crank out a couple more. As we go through Nyx and then Castra and then eventually Terra after that. So it's one of those things. I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be talking about Genesis or planets and stuff like this. And as we learn these
I'm sure they have estimates, though. I'd love to hear them, but they won't.
answers, we'll share more.
Yeah, absolutely. Letting the hyperbole get a little ahead of me.
No, that's like no. It's easy to get carried away. It's easy to get carried away. It's we're in year 13. We try to be very responsible with how much we promise at this point. It's about doing the work and actually getting the work done now.
That's why they won't give us the estimate.
One of the big elements of that Brave New Worlds presentation was weather, and I want to jump in. We have a lot of weather questions, so I want to jump into some of these weather questions here. Outside of thunderstorms, what other weather conditions or systems are we looking forward to implementing?
So
Weather is one of those things that can really help create an immersive environment. It's not surprising. There's a lot of weather questions.
I'll take that. So there's several that have been discussed internally. We haven't confirmed which ones we'll necessarily do first, but like the things that have been talked about that are potentially on the cards are things like sandstorms, obviously snow, and then potentially variations of those like acid rain, rather than the type of thunderstorms which were intended to be our first target. In terms of what we're excited by, I personally want the sandstorms. I think the tech is quite well geared for that, and they'll look really good. And we've got some recent films that type of give a lot of nice visual cues. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that in the game personally.
Be real honest with me. How much does seeing a major film, something like what you're talking about, I will just say it's Dune and whatnot. How much does that ever sway our priorities? Like, oh no, we really want to do that and stuff like this. You can be honest.
I mean, on the tech side, not enormously, I don't think.
Okay.
We're slightly at the mercy of the creative directors to tell us where we should put our energies. I guess, yeah. I mean, I've seen plenty of films that have recently that have sand and sandstorms in them and snow. I haven't seen an acid rain film recently. Maybe if there was one, it would jump to the top of the list, perhaps.
Of course, we do have planets like Hurston and several arid moons that would all benefit from that tech. So sandstorm specifically is something that would benefit quite a few different locations. Let's stick with weather for a bit. Is there a plan or a roadmap to improve cloud layer look from orbit? Grid effect, night shading, etc. There are bits of info from devs on Reddit, but we would love to hear more.
Yeah, that's probably going to be my question then. So thankfully the list for what we need to do for clouds is finally starting to get shorter instead of longer. But that's nice. We like have the fundamental framework falling into place. But there's obviously still quite a few more things we want to try and do, like improvements to shaping, shading, performance as well, and make them all more stable. As far as the tiling issues are concerned, that's more of a content thing as opposed to a tech thing. As in, we have plans to make tools that will definitely improve that and just produce better looking cloud formations with less of those issues showing up. Obviously, it would be nice if we could throw unlimited resources at everything, but we are still making a game and we have similar limitations to what we can render on the screen as all other games. It's just that our scale is a bit worse or better, depending on who you ask. It makes it a bit more difficult, but we definitely have plans and know how to tackle those issues a bit better in the future. And it's just iterating and learning how to best make the data to drive the system in the best possible way.
Yeah, I know that cloud tech has been something a lot of folks here were waiting for a long time. And yeah, obviously what we have is great, but like anything with Star Citizen, we're not one to generally rest on our laurels. So there will be a time where the development wheel turns its hands back to clouds, and we get more resources and more time to make that even better.
Seeing those weather patterns from orbit will be pretty awesome. And when we were watching some of those videos in the last CitizenCon, that stuff looked pretty exciting to me. Especially like as you're building like the space station above the planet, and you kind of see the clouds moving. Like all of these systems coming together really produce like a level of immersion. Like, I mean, it goes without saying, you just don't see anywhere else. Super exciting.
Hey, Graham, let's do an audio question.
Hello.
I feel like with Star Audio and the new Doppler effect, will we be able to hear the sonic boom in atmosphere?
Good question.
Also, we'll do 2 parts. Also, will ships like the Inferno be able to have a delayed brrr? Sorry, like the A10 Warthog, and will we be able to hear? Okay, this is like 3 questions in one, guys. Okay, let's just do this one piece by piece. Will Star Audio and the new Doppler effect, will we be able to hear a sonic boom in the atmosphere?
Ultimately, yes. It's on our development plan. And,
Nice.
It's not the most sort of difficult thing to do, but the more difficult things to do are the sort of fundamentals of making the Doppler sound good, making every sound that plays in the game work well with it. But we do have the data that we need in order to drive sonic boom. And as you saw at CitizenCon, we did some shockwave stuff on distant explosions, and that's pretty much the same concept. So yeah, we will get there, absolutely.
Something he said in that sentence that might be easy for somebody to miss is we do have the data we need to be able to produce the sonic boom. A lot of people wouldn't think about that, I would imagine, like whenever they're thinking about like my ship is flying through atmosphere and once I reach a certain speed, like I should hear a boom like that. I think it would be easy for a lot of people to overlook just how many things are required to make an interaction like that possible. Needing to know what the environment you're flying in is like, needing to know the speed of the ship. Keep in mind, I think this person on the screen right now is an audio tech, so like he's focused like entirely on just making the sounds, right? So in order to like know when to make that sound, or if you should make that sound, that involves a bunch of other teams. There's a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of interconnectivity between the systems that, yeah, you might just not think about.
All right, we'll do the second part of this question. Also, will ships like the Inferno be able to have a delayed brrr sound like the A10 Warthog?
Again, yes. It's all down to, I mean, it's kind of a content thing, really, to get the bird sound itself. But
I don't know what the
there's
bird
no
sound
reason
is.
why we can't. Then
Somebody who knows what they're talking about, drop me a comment.
Sort of horrific experience that you seem to be wanting.
I'm going to add a follow-up here. What are the challenges involved in making a delay seem intentional and not a mistake or a bug?
So those challenges are absolutely significant. one of the first things that came up when we first implemented a prototype of this was that when you walk away from somebody speaking and you start to see the lip sync go out, that's kind of like it's realistic, but people have seen movies often enough that they don't expect it. So we have to strike a balance between realism and the sort of the experience people are a little more used to on screen. There's also the challenge of camera zoom. That's huge. So when the camera's zoomed in and the audio listener is actually significantly further away than it appears on screen, that causes problems. So we're having to overcome some of that as well. But yeah, there are plenty of challenges.
That's interesting. That whole lip sync thing is not something I would have thought about. I'll have to give that some more thought. I don't know that I pay enough attention whenever I'm looking at something. It's probably just something my brain is automatically compensating for as I watch a film or whatever. I don't know if in real life I notice like desync on lips as I walk away from somebody, but maybe it's just because my eyes aren't good enough to see their lips that far away. I don't know. That's interesting. I would definitely trust this audio engineer more than I trust my perception of this. It's just, I find it fascinating. Now it's probably something I'll pay attention to more.
Okay. I think with there's a Starchitect question. Let's hit here. Would Genesis produce any actually large settlements on the scale of small towns or cities, or would that require more bespoke work?
So, yeah, it will create. It can create as big as we want, really, but the intention is not to create cities. We don't have hundreds of cities. We want our cities to feel very unique. We want extra care and love to go into them. So we're not currently planning to build anything as big as a city with it. And you'd probably need to adjust the algorithm a little bit, to the scale of content to make that work. But towns, definitely. Lots of small, medium-sized towns. Yeah, we certainly want as many of them as design think fits the game. And lots. I'm actually personally looking forward to lots of really tiny things. I want like mini settlements. I want like the guy in his caravan and all that. I want a bit more of that in the universe. But yeah, hopefully lots of small to medium-sized towns. And once they get a bit larger, I think that's where you really want to handcraft it and make sure that it has a strong narrative backing for it from design.
I also wonder how much players will impact this. Like I'm totally on board. Like seeing the guy in his little caravan, like his little living by the river or the lake, and like that's this little guy's life, and like these small towns. Like I'm excited to see these small towns, explore them, like get that, participate in those like bespoke quests that they're talking about, where you stumble upon somebody in one of these small towns and he needs you to go, I don't know, to a cave and rescue his dog or something. I'm excited for that kind of stuff. But I also am very interested to see like the level of player impact on the environment. Like, will the average player settlement be larger, smaller, about the same size as these kind of generated towns as produced by StarArchitect? It's going to be super interesting.
Makes sense. During the presentation, there was a lot of terms used to describe different footage. R&D phase, early footage, gray box. Folks know this. There's a nice set list of terms for like ship development, but the same system doesn't really equate to graphic stuff. And when the panel was ended, this person was conflicted over where their expectations should be set. Is all of this still R&D with clever renders, or is this technology at a stage where it could potentially be used to actually build a planet at this point?
So it's kind of a bit of a toss-up, really. We use the term vertical slice specifically, and that's something I'll kind of dive into a bit. We've kind of tried to do a bit of everything so that we can see the whole picture, and then kind of tweak our design from there and start finishing out each bit. And that means that, yes, we could build a planet, but there's no way we could ship it. It's not performant enough. It's not varied enough. It doesn't check all of the boxes that we want. There'd be all sorts of problems with the tech that is working for the difficult bits, but not working for the bits that mean that you can have 30 in a solar system and then 30 in another solar system and so on.
Remember when they shipped those new points of interest, like the settlements and stuff that, I don't know, a couple patches ago now, they deployed them to Microtech and Hurston. There was missions that would take you to those things, and the performance was just crap. I remember as an Aura, we went to some of these things to explore them, and you get within like a mile of these settlements, and like your FPS would just drop to like 2. It was a pretty miserable experience. I don't know if that's exactly what he's talking about when he talks about performance, but I would suspect so. Like graphics performance and how like the environment is able to harness your GPU and all that stuff. That's not something I know a whole lot about, but I would imagine there's a lot of considerations there as well.
One of the reasons we've approached it like this is because there's kind of such a fundamental change in the tech. Like the Genesis and the Planet Tech improvements are not just kind of changes to the output of the existing system. It is a fundamental kind of reshuffle and redistribution of work, which is largely because V4 kind of addressed the needs of planets, although the Planet Tech that we have kind of addressed the needs of planets as they were at 3.0. But nowadays there's a lot more requirements from that tech, whether it be kind of server meshing things, base building things, harvestables, persistence. So we've approached it from this vertical slice, which means yes, we can build a planet, but it's not the standards we want. But we're now at that point where we take that, we can say, okay, well, here's what worked, here's what we need to redesign, here is what we know is great, we've solved some of the big tech problems. Now we're transitioning to more of a kind of milestone-based approach where we're saying, okay, well, now we're going to finish out GPU spawning, and now we're going to finish out the orbital look and so on, and we can start kind of taking chunks of tech and finishing it. And I think one of the really important things as well is that we're not aiming to release this as one big floodgate and suddenly everything is out and boom, you've got Genesis. It's going to be features coming online bit by bit. And one of the early bits of tech is actually already in the 4.0 streams that are going out to EPTU right now. The planetary rewrite of how we store and subdivide our planet and into patches and so on is already out there in the world and working. And that's kind of one of the benefits of having done this as a vertical slice. It means that we're starting to reap the benefits already. In terms of grey box,
I don't know what he means by patches. I don't know if he's talking about like a patch of land or like I'm not sure, but the vertical slice thing makes sense to me. He keeps saying vertical slice in this segment, but what he means by vertical slice, which he's said a few times in this segment, is like if you think of StarArchitect or Genesis as an entire product, it's going to have many different features that come together to produce the final outcome, right? Like with Genesis, the final goal is to produce a planet that has reasonable physical characteristics. And there's a whole lot of things that are going to be required to do that. Those things could be rivers, forests, continents, villages, points of interest, right? And like, there's going to be a slice of the product that is responsible for creating the rivers. And that slice will kind of weave in and out of like the overall product, and then it will depend on information from other parts of the product, right? Like another slice of the product of Genesis might be like, how are the continents laid out on a planet, right? And so the slice that is responsible for creating rivers will definitely need information from the slice that is responsible for laying out the continents or the oceans. But each one of these slices will be able to kind of be developed and be further along in its development than the other slices, the other vertical slices, as he's calling them. And so when he talks about like them already being able to use some of the Genesis tooling in creating like the pyro planets, perhaps, that's what he's talking about. Like some of those vertical slices might be much further ahead. So while you can't use the Genesis tool as a whole to produce an entire planet yet, Perhaps the patch system, as he calls it, like I don't know if that's continents or like just kind of like patches of land, different biomes like forest, desert, or whatever. I don't know what exactly that is, but let's just assume rivers is also a thing that is far along in Genesis. And it would make sense that like you're able to use some of the Genesis tooling in the workflow of producing a planet today to at least get the rivers done much faster, or the patches done much faster. So hopefully that helps kind of understand what is meant by vertical slices here. Let's continue.
Eb, you can probably explain better what you meant by grey box in your sections. Sorry to drop you in.
Oh, yeah, sure. So like in our process, we usually have like white box, gray box, and then final and polish. For vegetation, doesn't really work that well, but like white boxes don't really represent vegetation as super well. So we just make a very rough version of it. Also, we were asked fairly late into the process of making the videos to add those labels, and we might have been a bit sloppy. So like the swarms were definitely further along than the jungle, for example. Jungle definitely very much what we consider white box. Swarms and redwoods a bit further along, with the swarms being the furthest. And yeah, it's all coming together.
Excited for jungles and redwoods.
Working through them, and a lot of what you've seen in white box is further along now and might be close to polished and final. And then we just need all systems, every other system, to make it into new planets and then release the thing. Maybe one day. No, I don't know.
Doesn't sound so sure of himself there, does he? Oh boy.
Seb, I love you. So basically, as Will was saying, it's not an all-in-one thing. It is Genesis within StarEngine is a collection of multiple different tools that are all being developed at different paces, with different necessities, with different requirements of them, with different dependencies of other stuff. So certain things will come online faster than other things, which is another reason why we can't quantify at this point just how much faster it'll make making planets until all that stuff comes online with everything else. But
there you go. He just said what I was trying to say another way. So maybe one of them makes more sense than the other.
Like I said, you will already start to see stuff in 4.0, which is the planet tree stuff that you mentioned. And then with 4.1, 4.2, subsequent releases, as different elements come online and are ready for prime time, they'll be used to reconstruct certain elements of different planets and stuff to support other features like base building and stuff like that. So I know one of the things that often happens, because I've been doing this for more than a decade here now, is this idea that, anytime we say this is going back to the foundation, or going back this is a rewrite of this and stuff like this, why do they keep remaking this and stuff like this? This is the normal process of game development. The difference part is that you don't normally see this exposed to anything else. It's one of the things that makes Star Citizen unique, being in a live service environment during the process of making the game. So it's not any different or anything unique to Star Citizen and Cloud Imperium games. It's other than you get to see it.
100% correct. I'm going to have another video coming out soon that goes deep into what he's saying right now, but this is 100% accurate, and I see so many people like just refusing to accept this reality. It's not just the standard process for game development, it is the standard process for software development in general across the entire industry. Every single software product everywhere is developed like this. Facts. Just accept it. Your opinion to the contrary does not matter. I'm sorry. All right, let's continue.
So, let's do a little asset distribution question. So, with the sheer density of forests and similar biomes in Genesis, how might this interact with gameplay like landing ships or driving vehicles around?
Right. It's
Good question.
Yeah, obviously, for CitizenCon we made the biomes to look their most intense, most dense. So we want to see what does it need to look like at its most densest, I guess. But obviously, with the new system and everything being having ideal conditions and less ideal conditions, you will have varying distances. They could be over multiple kilometers and just like have the forest, or like have something turn into a forest over a large distance, or it could be over some meters. So you get like clearings in the forests. The system would support all of that. We've just only shown the most dense and the most purest version of each biome at CitizenCon. So that's why they look very dense. They're not very friendly for landing and everything, but it's going to be very unique and varied everywhere on the planet. So you might have very different experiences depending on where you are.
We did see some areas where there were paths carved through the jungle and the forest and stuff. So it is possible to create paths and stuff through this stuff.
Technically, yeah, but like they will also just happen naturally based on what data we put into the system and what how fertile the soil is in certain areas, and maybe that was a water washing it away, and then you have like a path cleared out from certain species of vegetation that don't want to grow there, or there's more. I'm not gonna say more rocks there, but there could be more rocks that don't allow for vegetation to grow, but stuff like that, and it's all gonna be more systemic and hopefully and also more physically plausible. We won't have rocks everywhere anymore. They will be where they would be deposited based on erosion of hydraulic or thermal nature. So yeah.
Okay. So
all be varied.
all right. So if paths generate naturally and stuff throughout the system with the rule set and everything, well-traveled paths eventually begin to,
I was going to ask about this.
They start to get wider, and they start to form what some people might refer to as roads. Anything you want to tell us about roads?
I don't.
I can
It's a
say
nice place in Greece.
I can say regarding roads is that it's definitely something we want to do. A lot of the river tech when it was made made with kind of like and roads in mind, in terms of there's a lot of similarities in terms of kind of like dynamically.
I'm excited for roads. I think it's really gonna. It sounds stupid, like why is a road so exciting? But I think it will really bring a planet to life from like a perspective of people living on this planet, communities connecting. I mean, just or what happens on Earth whenever communities start popping up? Well, they connect to other communities, and I do think it's important for that. One thing that was popping into my head as they were talking about like paths forming systemically from data, like it seemed like he was implying like data about the evolution of the planet, like StarArchitect and Genesis, like informing that, like, you know, maybe there was once a river here, and so that riverbed became a path, or maybe there's more rock build up here, and so trees aren't growing here. And it sounded like that's kind of like what he was talking about from like a natural path formation standpoint. But it makes me wonder if it's possible for data to influence the natural evolution of paths. Might it be possible? I don't know, I'm reaching here and I'm contributing to like feature creep and all that, but I can't help but wonder, like, would it be possible for player data to someday inform changes to the environment and to the planet? Now, obviously, players are going to be able to build bases and blah, 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 but like, if two players or two different organizations put bases down a few miles apart and they began trading with one another, and they were very frequently driving their Ursa rovers through a particular forest, someday might we see those trees recede and some kind of a natural path form, or dare I say a road? That would be pretty awesome. Or if players could even build roads. Pros and cons to that. I don't want to see players blanketing the surface of Hurston in pavement, but definitely something in the back of my mind as I'm watching this. It'd be pretty cool.
Creating and destroying things as you approach it across a long spline, because if you just load a mesh for a 100-kilometer road, that's obviously not going to work. But it takes some time and some investment into the tooling and into making the assets and getting design and so on. We want to approach it. We're not approaching it this second.
Yeah, just to add to that, we've got Will's done a lot of the groundwork for that. So on the planet side, a lot of the work has been done, or wouldn't take much to go to take it further. You know, there's not a huge difference on the planet side between a river and a road. Where the work remains is there's a bit of graphics work to do. Obviously, a road doesn't look like a river. We need whatever stylistically we need to change there, and presumably, you know, the whatever assets would be distributed at the side of the road would be slightly different to a river. But probably the biggest difference is we assume it would come from StarArchitect. Like you would have to place all these locations on the planet, and then we have to figure out what would be the logical distribution of roads. There would need to be rule sets. You know, does this planet support roads? Is there areas of the planet that will and won't have roads? You know, maybe outlaw bases don't have roads. They don't maybe want to be signposted with a big motorway.
That's a really good point. I hadn't considered it, but yeah, definitely. StarArchitect would definitely have to be the driver of like whether roads exist. But like, as he was talking about, like these communities popping up, where does it make sense to be connected? The other thing I didn't think about is like, does the planet support roads? That's a really good question. Or like, if it doesn't support a natural road, like I wonder if the tool could be evolved to produce tunnels suspended above the surface. That'd be wild. I know that's a lot, but most of it's like he mentioned, graphics work. Like the fidelity that goes into that work is immense.
To an outlaw base, but you know, some places will. So it's that element that is the biggest part that's missing. And then obviously there'll be a bit of, once you have decided to connect to towns or locations, there's some code to figure out what is the best path to get between these two. Do I carve straight through every mountainside, or should I weave around them? Yeah, so there's a bit there. So on the planet side, we've kind of done it, but mostly on the tool side, we're deciding where the roads would go, and then a little bit of graphics to actually make it look like a road.
Literally, since planets were first introduced in 3.0, roads have been the most pressing and recurring question anytime we talk about planet tech on either ISC or SCL. So it was.
The difference was a few years ago. It was like, oh, where's the road going? You know,
right.
I'm driving out of Hurston, and where? Now we have a plan. There will be somewhere to go. So at least there's good reason for it now.
Also, like ground vehicles are a huge element of Star Citizen that I know people struggle to make use of, or to find a reason to use. I think there's, for the same reasons that like the idea of flying through atmosphere and whatever particular ship appeals to somebody, I think the exact same thing is driving that interest in driving my motorcycle or my hover bike or whatever along this road that is winding through a forest or along the coast of a river or a lake. I mean, I'm definitely interested in doing that. I think that'd be cool as hell.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's a good answer. I think folks will appreciate your candor on this. Let's jump back into weather. If it stops raining, will the puddles and ground remain wet for a while, or will they dry out immediately?
Yes, we've recently just changed that, so it does do what you would hope it would do. So it keeps track of the average amount of water in the ground, and it evaporates over time using a physically plausible model, which we tweak to be kind of a cross between whether you want it realistic or what feels good for the gameplay based on the scale of our planets and the wind speed and stuff. Yeah, it will stay wet for some period of time after the rain has passed. So all good there.
Cool. And I don't know if this is a weather question, but you know, somebody's thinking creatively. If you die in the water, for instance, in a swamp or whatever, do you float?
All we can recommend there is to take a really good friend with you to an ocean or a lake on Microtech, shoot them in the head and see what happens.
You mean do that right now?
Be my guest.
Okay.
We've done this, but I'm not going to give away what happened.
Just the views and opinions of Will Hain do not represent those of Cloud Imperium Games, Robert Space Industries, or its subsidiaries. Will we ever see, go back to asset distribution, will we ever see lakes?
It was unintentional.
Ponds, waterfalls, cliffs, or deep ravines?
I mean, you already see lakes. There's, 15 of them on Microtech and about 18 of them on Hurston. We want to take a look at things like smaller ponds that might form without kind of a necessary or a visible water source, but it's not kind of scheduled or road mapped. And along with waterfalls and deep ravines, it's stuff that we want to be able to do, and we are
Cool.
approaching a place where we're in a better position to implement that, but they're not kind of like things that we have tasked out and planned out. Cliffs is something we are going to take a better look at as part of the current planned work for Genesis.
I think everybody is probably, not everybody, but a lot of people are probably have that dream or vision in their head of being the first person to like see some massive cliff and waterfall and ravine on the planet, and just at least wondering if they were the first person to see that.
People are always sharing that old canyon screenshot from Daymar, and that wasn't a viable way of doing that across a planet, but we're hoping to come up with a more holistic approach for doing these cliffs, and we've already improved the cliff rendering in terms of what is shown on the terrain mesh itself, which is a big part of what's missing at the moment. So yes on that one, and the others are kind of like from my heart, I want to do them, but I have to wait for my heart to match the bullet points on paper.
Fair enough.
By bullet points on paper, he means the project schedule.
Graham, I think this question is more a follow-up to the Star Audio presentation from last year, but we'll get into it. So Star Audio looked great. However, the audio engine in-game is already having a hard time. Weapon sounds stop randomly, and some audio simply doesn't work.
Really?
Is this technology a replacement of the
don't think
entire
I've seen
audio
that.
engine, or simply an extension of the system we have now?
Seen a lot of problems, but
So it's absolutely been designed as a replacement. Some of those issues that you hear are due to some fairly naive culling of sounds, which obviously in Star Citizen you can't predict what's going to happen. We have a very limited budget for how many sounds we can play, how many ships we can play sounds for, things like that. And Star Audio is, it's absolutely planned to replace all of this stuff and improve all of these situations. So in the example of weapon fire cutting out, we have a much more intelligent budgeting system that will take into account the sort of importance of those sounds to the player at that moment, whether they're visible on screen, how close they are, how many other sounds in the sort of similar categories are playing. So we can definitely improve all those things with Star Audio. It's just a case of working through all our systems, because we have audio systems hooked into pretty much everything the game can do. So we need to work through all those things one by one and get them all hooked into Star Audio. And eventually, sometime down the line, we won't have any of the old systems.
Okay, I'm going to follow
Awesome.
up here. Karasaki in the chat simply asks, audio ray tracing?
It's something we've talked about a little in the past, myself and Ali, but never really been able to dive into it deeply. But it's certainly something I'd like to revisit, because, for things like reverbs, for, understanding what materials are present in a room, understanding the damping effects of those materials, that's something that we really would need something like ray tracing to help us with. But it's... Let's let the graphics do their side of ray tracing first, and then maybe we can talk after that.
I don't know much about audio. I'm not an audiophile at all. I tend to think of audio as an afterthought until I experience it, and then I'm like, whoa! Definitely contributes to immersion, but I just don't give it enough thought. I'm the same way in IRL. Like, I'll hook up a big screen TV, and I don't even think about the audio until I turn it on. And I'm like, oh, this sounds like crap. So then I'll go out and I'll buy a sound bar and I'll hook that up. And yep, sounds good. I have friends that are into like hooking up the receiver and wiring up speakers and testing position. That's not me, but I can certainly appreciate it.
Fair enough. This looks like maybe it's a Starchitect question. Any plans, near or far, to incorporate ancient alien ruins / bunkers into the dynamic planetary systems? This person thinks it would be cool to uncover lore and a possible storyline about ancient galactic civilizations.
That would be so cool. And maybe we'll do it, but would be lame if we spoiled it now, right?
Be so cool.
Can't tell you the things you need to discover until you discover them.
Yeah. I will say the seeds for such things have already been planted with things like this here for those who recognize what that is from CitizenCon year past. It's like that. So yes, we don't want to spoil that.
I don't recognize it. What is it?
I think you'll be happy at some point. Let's look back to, are there any plans for variable planet rotation speeds, obliquity, there's not a word we don't say every day, obliquity, axial tilt, orbit, eccentricity, and atmosphere makeup,
Rotation
or
speeds would be
lack
cool.
thereof.
As far as our side goes for planet orbiting, it could be turned on, but it's going to make quantum traveling anywhere very difficult because the system isn't kind of set up for that as far as we know. In terms of more complex kind of orbit, most of those things are totally possible with the systems that we have in place. We would depend on design and law to explain maybe why we want some of those things. But yes, one of the things that we do need to do, of course, is axial tilt to match our seasons. The seasons are going to be coming, and actually we don't need to wait, unlike orbit, we don't need to wait for any other system to turn on seasons. We could turn on the seasons and just have it know where the tilt would be, even if we can't tilt or move the planets yet. So that is dependent on us finishing out that stuff and finishing out the content in terms of making it look right and so on. But yeah, very excited for this sort of stuff to come online when it does.
Okay. You bring up a good point that sometimes even if a thing is technically capable, you can't turn it on or enable it because of other game-related systems that will break or aren't quite ready for it, like the quantum travel system. That's a good. I'm glad you pointed that out. Will planets?
Typically, you would prepare for it by getting that feature ready and shipping it and having it ready to go. And then you do something called a feature flag or something like that that turns it on or off. It would be interesting to know if that's already there, ready to be turned on. Some of the language they've used here or previously kind of indicates that it is there and ready to be turned on. They're just waiting on other systems to come online to support it, but I don't know that for sure.
Such as Microtech get snowfall and snow accumulation.
So with P5, obviously we need to revisit some of the data that every planet is based on, and the goal is more physical plausibility, and this is definitely a big part of what we want to do. Will has talked about the separation of different layers, and snow being the last one. Obviously, it makes sense to drive this purely by climate and temperature being the most important one for that. So yeah, there will be a technical requirement to do that, and obviously we really want to do it as well, just for more consistent, more believable planets, and it's going to be good, I think.
Is this one of those things?
Monday.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Oh, I thought.
Will we be able to build snowmen?
that's for physics probably, and graphics, not me. So who knows?
Allie, snowman?
Please.
I mean, I'd be looking for leaving a snow trail and yellow snow before we get to snowman.
Sure. Is this one of those things where snowfall might come before snow accumulation, or is this one of those things where it's a 1-1, you don't get one without the other?
Quite a few people in our organization that are excited for bathroom gameplay. All the bathrooms and all these ships and everything, so why not yellow snow?
So like I mentioned earlier, we don't have we haven't decided for certain yet
Yeah, I'm talking about you, Kenthus.
with creative directors whether systems will come first, and obviously the more we work on weather, the less we work on some of the other aspects of Genesis. So some of that is still to be decided. But if snow was to become a thing, then it would be easier for us to release snow in places where it already has snow on the ground. That would be a much easier thing for us to deliver. So that would be a potential shorter route for us. To make it snow in somewhere that has never had snow, there's a few extra technical challenges there. You know, we have to build up the snow, and then we have to make sure the assets that are there, all the trees and rocks, support that technology. So there might be asset, touch-ups to be done. So it's a bit more complicated for that side of it, and then to have the snow evaporate over time, melt. So snowing on Microtech is more likely to happen before snowing at the poles of a more temperate planet.
Makes sense.
With the
Although I think he just mentioned the poles there. That's pretty wild to think about. I haven't really considered that, but it would be very cool if like the poles of Hurston were snow-capped, iced over. That'd be neat.
the implementation of Genesis and the next iteration of Planet Tech and stuff, will planets like Microtech be adapted to have biomes located in the correct places based on latitude? For example, frozen biomes around the poles and temperate forest around the equators.
Yeah, I think it's basically the same answer I had on the last question as well. Like, it needs to be. Like, we need to make it all more plausible, and the data will be, and then it'll just happen.
Fair enough.
We kind of need for the weather. We need the data to be more physically correct so that the weather can match. We can't have it snowy in somewhere that's 20 degrees Celsius. So it comes hand in hand. The weather will be based on physically based stuff, but then Seb has to go and make sure the planets are following them physically based rules. With V5, it'll be automatic with the new planets, but when it comes to the older planets, we'll have to touch them up to make sure that they are plausible.
Okay.
How many games need to track this much data and simulate this much? That's not a criticism, because somehow, some way, it feels really important in this game that those things are properly simulated. And I agree, but it's really freaking cool.
Maybe some bits get more snowy or less snowy as that happens to make sure it all makes sense physically.
Okay. Will the mud? Well, okay. Let's look at two-part question here. Will rains create mud?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the design points for the new planet shader is that the different
course it
soil
will.
categories, like the kind of visual appearance of soil, will kind of have a matching set of what they look like in different amounts of humidity. So you'll have a cracked clay and a cracked soil and a whatever, and then you'll have a damp and then a saturated
That's
and then like
badass.
an oversaturated. I don't know. I've just pulled those categories out, but something like that. So that's kind of based from the beginning that we want to incorporate that into our data. And then so some of it will come from static data, like being next to a river or just being in an area where there is higher water availability. But then kind of transitioning these based on local rainfall is definitely part of the plan, yeah.
Okay. The second part of this
Cool.
question is whether that mud that's created from the rain will affect the term they use is crossability, but basically uneven terrain or
Crossability.
difficult. In D&D, we'd call it. Will it make difficult terrain for people on foot or in wheeled vehicles?
We can report the surface type back to physics, and then other systems can change their behavior based on that. I don't want to speak for all the other systems that would have to then come and change their behavior. So that
It's going back to what we talked about earlier, where I was saying about whenever he talked about we have the data we need to. This is more of that, which I find fascinating. Like, it sounds like here the humidity will create a change in the properties of the soil, and that actually is being captured in the system as data, which can then be handed off to another system, and that system can react to that data change. Again, this is something that is not super intuitive whenever you're not thinking about these types of things on a regular basis, but like it's easy to think, well, if there's mud on the surface, I should be walking slower through it, not even thinking about all the systems connected and making that a reality. Anyway, cool. This stuff intrigues me.
the physics on the wheeled vehicles and the actors and so on. But all of these systems already do respect different surface types. Audio is another important one, of course, as well, because soil and mud
Do they?
sound very different. So by changing the surface type at some sort of threshold, we hope to be able to provide the information needed for this.
I don't know that I've noticed my Ursa driving differently on different surface types. Maybe I'm just not cognizant enough, but if they do, that's cool.
To the systems that would then change those behaviors.
Yeah, this is one of the. I don't know. I want to try and think of what I'm trying to say here. Only Star Citizens, and I mean this as a compliment, would hope that rain would create mud that would create difficulty traversing and accomplishing their goals. It's one of the shared interests between us and our fan base here, and I love that. I love that question. It's basically what I'm trying to get at, and I hope it's something that materializes.
Good one.
Do clouds move in one direction across the planet, or are they actually dynamic and move in all directions, forming cool patterns from space?
All right. Conceptually, obviously, we've looked at a lot of papers and weather simulations and how clouds form and move on Earth. And conceptually, they will follow the general planet's rotation from orbit and from a larger picture point of view. They will be deviating from this direction, though, just so you get like what you get in nature. Obviously, we might not be able to do the full thing, like running a full weather simulation on the servers might be problematic for performance, to say the least. So we're trying to make it as efficient as possible, but also look the best. So they will be able to deviate from the primary direction they are moving in. How far we can push this, we don't fully know yet. We're still exploring what we can do with the tech, how we can improve it a little bit further, and what we can do with the data to make it do more with the same amount, ideally. And but yeah, we definitely plan to have very varying weather patterns moving all over the planet in believable ways based on the data that the planet is providing.
Okay. I want to throw two questions.
I feel like they need to tap into the Earth 2.0 stuff that NVIDIA is doing. It's just crazy. I mean, I find the stuff NVIDIA is doing on Earth 2.0 to be crazy, but it's also crazy how much these folks are doing. It's pretty awesome.
Questions from the chat in here. The first is from Jesus Pug, first time chatter. Can we cut down trees?
What, as in today?
No, as in the spec for what we're working towards.
We're incorporating some kind of technology decisions into our tech at the moment that will allow us to better kind of support individual behaviors on assets, which is a long-winded way of saying that there's a lot of stuff that goes into being able to scatter 20 million trees across a planet and then being able to point at one of them and say, I want you to be chopped down.
Makes sense.
But we're bearing it in mind.
Good answer.
That's how I'm going to leave that.
Nope, good answer. I knew I could trust you to answer to throw the curveball.
Same thing would apply to like asteroid belts. I would imagine it's the same thing where you're rendering thousands or millions of an object, which that blanket of things the system is probably seeing as like a thing with certain properties, like render distance between objects and like whatever all the properties are. But like, yeah, to his point, like being able to address an individual, like the same thing in asteroid belts. I often, when we're flying through an asteroid belt, I often think like, my gosh, I wish I could just shoot that asteroid and blow it up. It would be cool if the same thing that allowed us to chop down a tree allowed us to interact with an asteroid in that way.
The other question is the current question that's dominating the chat right now, and that's what any of this means for ArcCorp. ArcCorp is not built like any of our other planets. Everybody knows that. It's not built with the Planetech system. Does weather come to ArcCorp? Do
I've never
any of these
flown.
features come to ArcCorp? And can any of these features be used to improve or further develop ArcCorp in the future? Or is
I've never flown across ArcCorp randomly. I've only kind of visited the prescribed areas. And I don't even know what it looks like if you just pick a random spot and descend. I should do that.
that something entirely different?
I mean, ArcCorp does use the Planet Tech. I mean, there's a lot of special cases on ArcCorp. It's shaded differently. We type of abuse the system a little bit to get the results we want on ArcCorp, to say the least. It probably will be a similar story. We're not planning on spending a year making bespoke ArcCorp tech, but there is parts of the new system that we're hoping will allow improvements on ArcCorp. Obviously, things about the amount of light that will gather underneath a tree and whether a fern can grow isn't really relevant. But there are many other parts that are relevant, with like the density, with the way we position things. We type of intentionally kind of randomize. We have a grid pattern for where we're going to put things, but then we randomize it. We could kind of just remove that randomization and get an actual grid pattern more naturally. And yeah, a lot of these rule sets, they're built for nature, but some of them, again, they're more powerful this time, so we might be able to abuse them again to get something nice out of ArcCorp. But that type of, we're not focusing on that at the moment. We're making sure that we can deliver every other planet, and we're hopeful that we will then be able to do something nice with ArcCorp at the end as a result, because all planets must eventually use this tech. There is no option long term. They all must use it. It's just a question of how much we have to change to make it suitable for ArcCorp, and which we won't fully know yet until we give it a bash.
Yeah. ArcCorp is an unnatural abomination.
It'll definitely get weather, though. That much I think we can say. It'll definitely get weather.
Okay. Very cool. Will Genesis allow for more realistic placement of mining nodes, being placed on the areas of exposed rock layers like cliffs instead of being randomly scattered on the planet's surface?
That's definitely in the cards for sure. I don't know if Will wants to talk about the whole entity thing, but conceptually, yeah, we'll definitely be able to have them. Right now they're like tied to the biome they're in, but in the future we can be more specific and spawn them on cliff sides or where the rocks fall down at the base of a cliff, and then you will find them there and stuff like that. It's definitely possible, I think.
I mean, yeah, I think we want to treat a harvestable like any other asset, in that if it's a mining rock, we want to spawn it according to parameters that we would spawn a regular rock. We kind of don't care whether it's here's a game entity that you can mine versus here's a static piece of geo. We kind of want to do them with the same rules, and it'd be the same for because you get those the revenant trees that you go in. No, revenants are bushes. Then there's the heart of the forest tree or whatever. We want to scatter them just like any other vegetation, based on the same data and the same rules. So if you're asking, is it going to be more realistic, then I would say yes. I think Seb also alluded to the new kind of entity management spawning-y stuff. I don't think that's going to help the specificity of the locations, but it's definitely going to help the density of these things. And I won't elaborate into that right now because that's the managed entity system is a very techie, boring subject that you can't cover without a TED talk.
Well, now we know what we're doing early next year.
Let's
I'll
do
come
it.
by your desk on Monday and talk to you about it. Graham, so you talked.
Minables is one of those things I have a love-hate. This is a tangent, but like, I feel like rocks are done pretty well in the game. One thing that feels very immersion breaking to me is the way that gemstones are handled. For some reason, it has always bothered me the way we fly across the planet's surface, kind of scanning for gemstones and then going down and mining them with like a rock. I don't know. Wish there was a better way of doing it. It feels good in a cave with a hand mining thing. I feel like that feels pretty good, but the whole planetary surface just flying across looking for gemstones just never felt quite right to me. It would be cool if like what they're talking about could make that feel better, like seeing them embedded in cliff sides or whatever, rather than just, oh, here's some rocks laying on the surface. Like, oh.
You mentioned that Star Audio is intended as a complete replacement of the current audio engine system. We've been talking about Star Audio for a little while. We introduced it, I believe, last year at CitizenCon. What are the blockers remaining? What's between us now and the eventual implementation and swap out of the system?
Well, some of the biggest blockers are just the sheer volume of systems that we have running, and the design of Star Audio is that we take all the features that are embedded in those game systems and make them all part of the engine, and we're chipping away at that. So that's the biggest blocker for it to be covering everything, is that we need to have every single possible audio feature covered within the engine, whereas right now there's a lot of game code, a lot of very specific code for certain situations that's been designed for those specific situations. So it's all about making everything as generic as possible and making all these features available to whichever game system wants to use them. So it's the biggest blocker is the sheer volume of work involved. That's the only way I can put it.
Makes sense.
Will large ships be able to compress trees and plants to land in these dense forests? We talked about the paths and everything, but what if we just try to force it?
I would
This
imagine.
is kind of linked to what I said before with chopping down trees. There's kind of a few complications that come here. If you think about, I want to knock over a tree with my ship, that sounds like a simple behavior, but there's all the gameplay stuff about like how you would go around and chop a tree and the kind of design behavior from that, and so none of that's done, so we need to wait for that. And then from our end, there's kind of 3 core bits that we need to worry about. There's promotion, which is taking our very kind of highly optimized tree asset that renders in a particular way and is spawned by a particular system, and replacing that with something that we can interact with and uniquely address and tell what to do. There's the managed entity system, which I alluded to, which is essentially about making spawning of entities server meshing friendly and persistent. And then there's persistence itself, which is kind of like, okay, well, you've crushed a forest with your Idris. There were, 700 trees under there that we now need to remember have not done something, and actually just creating 700 entities and chucking them in the entity graph is not an efficient way of going about that. So we need to make complex decisions, like if a tree becomes fallen over next to your base, you probably care about that tree. But if you knock over 500 trees on your way to New Babbage, we could probably come up with something different to record that there are fallen trees in this area, but not 700 unique entities for each fallen tree. So there's a whole ton of work that goes into stuff like this, and it's not even really kind of planned for or guaranteed at this point. All I'll say is that we want our system to be able to support more complex behavior and start to approach these problems. I don't know if Ali or Seb want to give anything more on that.
This makes a ton of sense, and it's really interesting what he's talking about here, where like we talked about earlier, like a forest is kind of a thing, like the entire forest is a thing rendered by the system, and changes to that forest, how do you efficiently reflect them? Like he said, like you can't take 700 fallen trees and shove them in as entities into the graph, because if you try to scale that up to everybody flying Idrises over planets and whatever, you're going to end up with just a ton more of entity traffic as a result of this. It's also interesting him calling out like the difference of like player expectations and player interest. Like if you knock a tree down by your base, chances are you do want that tree to remain knocked down. Whereas things happening deep in an uninhabited forest of microtech doesn't matter so much. Like I find all this very interesting, and it does not surprise me that it's not on the near-term roadmap to handle. but it is encouraging and interesting and fascinating that they are already thinking about it. Obviously, like the kind of the speed of his response tells me that it's certainly something they've talked about, discussed, and thought about, but also realize the complexity associated with this, and like it's not going to happen today or tomorrow.
But absolutely do not take this as any sort of guaranteeing. Just that, yeah.
So I guess the only thing to add is, yeah, there's the problems of, like Will said, about keeping track of how many trees. You know, if you pressure interest 10,000 times and now there's 1 million trees that are being
Yeah.
chopped down, we have some serious issues to type of
Yeah, that's the
figure out
scale
there.
part.
And there's obviously Seb's staying quiet, but obviously if we want to chop trees, Seb has a lot of work to do. Unless they're just going to evaporate in a puff of smoke, that makes life easier. But yeah, if they depends on the level of destruction they're going to get. That also affects the entity graph stuff. You know, it's whether we just remember 700 trees have gone away, which is 700 bits of data, or whether we have to remember that 700 trees have been carved up into 75 pieces and scattered around the universe. Then
Yeah,
that's obviously more for the entity graph, and the network people will be quite angry at us if we push it too hard. Yeah, so some
Very
things
interesting.
we're type of on the path. We know there's a momentum heat or a black hole dragon is in that direction, so we are paving the way for these kinds of decisions, because at the moment it's just not plausible, but we're paving the way so that some decisions can be made as to the specific, you know, how many trees can they be chopped, or they just blow up or fall over, and you know,
that's a good way of putting it. Like we're putting, and I'm glad that they are, like, this is like where they are in the development process right now. That is the best thing they can do. Like, predict that this is going to be something that will matter and start putting small bits and hooks and constructs in place to support that eventuality. If you remember back to our discussion on the servers behind 1.0, one of the things I talked about there was like the decreasing cost of operations per second over time. This could be something that really helps the desires to do things like this. Like today, it might be prohibitively expensive to implement something like this, but 5-10 years from now, it might be far cheaper and far more realistic to add those million entities into the entity graph. And so now that future thinking of putting these hooks in place that they're talking about pays off, and somebody 5 to 10 years down the road calls these people geniuses for doing so.
There's lots to be figured out in specific. Yeah,
It's
definitely paving the way for this kind of thing.
It's a slippery slope from being able to chop down one tree with an axe or a chainsaw to crashing your javelin shallowly like the Enterprise saucer section in Generations and just taking out a 3-kilometer wide swath of trees in Microtech.
But how cool would it be, though, Jared? Come on.
Which is exactly what people will attempt to do.
Exactly.
So
in another game, you might say that the trees grow back in 10 minutes, but that's kind of not our game, is it? So we have to deal with the type of level of realism that we're aiming for and the implications of that. It's a little bit harder. If we wanted to gamify this, we could make it a lot simpler.
Yeah. Strake is in the chat is like, he almost said 3 mile. I'm trying. I've been living in the UK for 2.5 years now. I'm trying really hard to convert to kilometers. It's not easy. In how much detail will planetary data be used to shape weather patterns?
I think in miles.
And what weather are you looking to simulate?
All right. So since we need to address the whole general V4 data versus V5 data anyway for the planets, and the clouds are just part of that process anyway, like they will come out of the same tool set basically. Our aim is to have a default weather behavior for a planet. If you generate a generic planet, it will just create ideally the weather patterns for cold air moving underneath warm air, pushing it up, causing cumulus clouds to form into cumulonimbus clouds. Hate that word, but and everything in between ideally, and then also having warm air moving over cold air, which will cause the stratus family of
I don't remember all those cloud types from science class.
clouds to form. And that's like our default behavior we want to do for every planet if we need to. And on top of that, there will obviously be different things. As in, you have like a very planet with a specific need for a certain weather pattern, or like very different or alien planets with alien clouds, whatever that means. We don't know yet. And we just try to do that as well. But yeah, the idea is that we can cover as many different cloud types as possible with the resources we have, and yeah, then vary it based on individual planet needs. So yeah.
Well, why do you hate cumulonimbus?
It's a very hard word to say. They're really great. I love the clouds themselves. They look really good, and they're the only ones that make lightning. Really cool. So
It is a very hard word.
more or less, some exceptions, but
All right.
I don't know what it
All right,
means.
we're in the end game here. Last weather question. Any plans for nature's wrath beyond lightning strikes? We're going to get as crazy as tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons.
Volcanoes.
How crazy are we
Volcanoes.
aiming to go with this?
Come on, give us volcanoes.
I mean, hurricanes and typhoons are the same thing, just different names depending on where you are on the planet. It's just like very strong winds, and from orbit you have this giant circling.
Speaking of very strong winds, I must say one of my very early experiences in Star Citizen was landing a ship near a cave on Microtech, getting out of the ship, and asking, like, why am I moving so slow? Turns out my character was moving against the wind. My visor was getting like all watery and wet. I was moving super slow. I looked over, the ship's kind of rocking in the wind. That was one of the first memories I have of this game, and it was so, like, it's definitely one of those moments that made me think, like, yep, Star Citizen is my game. So, like, this discussion on weather, and it's exciting to me. Like, it definitely has a special place here because, like, of just how damn immersive it is. I definitely would love to see more of that. I can't wait to battle other elements of nature.
Weather front moving around. We might not be able to do it like that from orbit. We'll definitely be able to turn up the knob a little bit on what our weather looks like compared to what you've seen in CitizenCon. Obviously, it needs a lot of work from different departments to make this all a coherent experience. Tornadoes, it's not really a weather cloud thing. Like, they move at a very different rate than the clouds will be able to move. So it would be more on VFX and graphics, and I don't want to commit them to do anything that they might not be able to support anytime soon.
Want
But yeah,
volcanoes.
definitely we will have certain planets with cyclones on them. If they will move the way they do in nature, we'll need to see how far we can push the system, or if they will be a little bit less. But yeah, I don't know yet. We'll see. We're still learning. We're still working with the data, and the
Earthquakes.
tools, and expanding them, exploring them, making better data, and you can expect a lot of iteration for the weather over the next few months and maybe years.
Ali, any thoughts on Aurora Borealis?
That one does actually come up a bit. We would kind of like that one. All of the stuff in the atmosphere ends up being quite difficult, though, especially when they interact with each other. So the clouds and the atmosphere are in the same volume, and then the rain is covering the same, and then ground fog. These things are all overlapping and quite problematic. For the Aurora Borealis, I take it. I mean, I've not looked into the science of it. I assume it's always above the cloud layer, isn't it? And if it is, that at least simplifies the problem a bit for the rendering side. We've certainly made accidents that look like Aurora before in VFX and graphics, usually bugs, sometimes intentional from artists. Yeah, that's one I'd quite like, personally, and it's possibly easier than some of the others. But it's also quite separate. You know, we have to intentionally decide we're going to stop doing this. Aurora is what we want to do, and we haven't quite had the creative direction telling us, like, do that now. Maybe we want Auroras for this next release, but it's certainly plausible that came from up above.
Okay. Last two questions. Here's an oldie but a goodie. Will planets ever be scaled up more than their 1/8 size to real life for more realism, or as it is, the mountains feel small? Write a check, Will.
Oh my gosh. Write a check, Will. Oh, I never really thought of it. He's not wrong. The mountains do feel small, but like the planets do not feel small. It's I don't even know that I would say the mountains feel small. Maybe in some areas, but there's definitely areas I've been in where I'm standing at like the peak of a mountain and I'm looking down, and it's just so damn impressive looking down into like the basin below or whatever you call it. That's definitely not something that has stood out to me as like, wow, these mountains are small now. That's not where I would invest the money. But that is funny. Me, like the 1/8 scale. I didn't even know that it was 1/8 scale. It's just, I mean, the planets are so freaking massive. I can't imagine it being a priority to make them bigger. But that made me laugh.
Right. I think we'd like that because we feel the small too, especially as we introduce more and more advanced
Wow.
atmosphere. It kind of it breaks our nice illusion that our planets are full scale, which I hope all of you continue to believe, because I certainly do in my heart. The thing about bigger planets
I never thought of it, so they have me believing it.
is it stretches the complications with precision more, which we're hoping to be able to do away with, but that's one problem. Obviously, we need high resolution textures. At the moment, if we have a global texture and it's, say, 2K, that gives us a certain number of kilometers per pixel. And then obviously we have local data too. But if we make a planet have twice the surface area, then suddenly we have half as much resolution for the same kind of budget. So we need to consider those decisions and consider how the tech can deal with that. But you also get kind of gameplay problems with that as well. If I make a real life-size planet, we have fast ships, but like suddenly getting from one place to another takes 10 times as long, and it's not necessarily
Good
good
point.
for gameplay to have that. So it's a
Good point.
convoluted question. We appreciate the reason that people are asking, though. We feel the same. But also there's a certain amount of the why question, which I guess you can ask for a lot of our features, which is what we have works, what we have is great. Should we invest more time in making it bigger? Is that a good use of our time versus going and doing Rivers 2 or finishing out something else sooner?
Roads.
Whatever. Roads.
Roads.
So if you put up a poll that said roads versus bigger planets, I bet roads would win. So
Yeah.
I'd
take
probably
that
add
with it.
that the 8 times is probably, like I say, it probably pushes all of them aspects too much. Too low res, it's too much memory, it's too much of a knock on for the gameplay. A smaller increment would be more appealing, I think. Like a doubling or something like that, because just being able to double the scale of our mountains would be nice, and double the scale of our global features, mountain ranges, would be nice. So something 2 or 3x, would be more chill. But 8x, it's pushing a few too many areas at the same time, probably. And then the other thing we talked about, we didn't mention, is content density. We have to fill it with stuff as well. We'll see with StarArchitect, hopefully helps fill that gap a bit, but we just don't want to, if the current game, we don't want to put things miles apart. But as we start to see the product of StarArchitect, we might be able to see, okay, yeah, things are feeling too crammed and claustrophobic. Maybe we do need a bit more space, and we'll try and explore that. But yeah, probably.
I can definitely see them getting to a point where they need a little bit more space. Definitely not 8x. That's a really good point he brings up about scale, and content density. This is, again, like I mentioned earlier, when you think about mud or something, or whatever, it's easy to just kind of think of this as a closed system, easy to make this change. Like mud should slow me down, and just like they described all the connections and things that actually go into something like that. This is the same type of question. Like you might be able to think, I'll just double or triple or quadruple the size of a planet, but the just enormity of the impact of that decision, affecting everything from the entity count, content density, how much more you need Genesis to do, speed of ships, like the impact on gameplay will be enormous. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but like that definitely needs very careful consideration. Personally, I would say that gameplay trumps almost everything. Well, I think it does trump everything. And I'm not saying that you can't make the gameplay good with a doubling of the size of the planets, but I can definitely relate to what they're saying here, like this, the enormity of such a decision and how many factors they need to include in that decision.
Probably 8x is probably pushing it, I think.
And the last question, rock distribution. I got to ask about rock distribution. You mentioned a little bit of it, CitizenCon and these things. I know not all these systems come online at the same time, stuff like this. A lot of the desire for roads, I think, besides the aesthetic stuff, comes from the incredibly disastrous and detrimental nature of rock distribution on ground vehicles. Is there some hope for us in the future of thinning these out a bit and making the ground vehicle experience, even as we wait for roads, a little more pleasant for people?
I'd take
I
that.
mean, we can finally do denser and better vegetation, so maybe we can do less rocks now. But we do love rocks. I know, but kidding aside, with
You're
the
the
new
only
local
one.
data, it will be, the distribution will be different. It will not be as
Oh man,
even anymore. The big rocks will be more out of the way to some extent.
I hate
It will
driving on
be
Hurston.
more obvious where they are, and you will most likely be able to drive much further without being constantly thrown around by hitting a rock.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like we won't ever have places that do have a lot of rocks, but hopefully the most common scenario might be I'm driving down a valley. There's a nice clear path down here, but up on the sides, there's like, you can see the big piles of rocks coming down each side, but you can kind of make out a clear path. And it's
Thank
not
you.
like just a random roll of the dice whether you're going to rock like immediately in
Good
front
question.
of you. So we're hoping it feels
Back
better.
to that
but until we
gameplay.
have to finish a planet, drive along it at speed, we'll have to see. But yeah, we're hoping this leads to much more realistic.
Cool. And if it doesn't, I know where you all sit.
I'm in Germany. I'm sorry. for a while at least. So.
I can get to Germany. I can find you. All right, folks, thank you so much. That was a great show. I think folks in the chat, and if I can speak for the YouTube viewers later, will really appreciate your candor and information on a variety of topics related to StarEngine and Genesis. So thank you so much. Graham, thank you for hanging out with us. I know we only had a couple questions for you, but you stuck it out like a champ, and your answers were really great. I think folks are really looking forward to Star Audio and the wealth of improvements it's going to make for the Star Citizen experience. That's it for this week's show. If you haven't, check out yesterday's ISC. That was with Benoit and members of the UK networking team about all the different tech preview tests that are going on right now as we head to 4.0 and that release. Next week is IAE and something a bit different. There won't be an SCL next Friday. There will be something different, and it's in the place of ISC and SCL next week on Friday. So be sure you check that out. For SCL, I'm Jared.
We'll be there.
That's Pete on the dials, that's Lauren on the buttons, and that was Ali, Will, Seb, and Graham with the great answers. So thanks for watching. I'm Jared. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week on whatever that different thing is. See you then.
That was cool. It was unexpected. I didn't know this was coming out, but it was just a nice, cool, chill watch for me. Nothing too earth-shattering in there. Like I said in the beginning, I think that StarArchitect and Genesis are probably some of the most critical tools that they talked about at CitizenCon this year. I'm very excited that so much investment is being made in these because I think it'll be pivotal to the experience that we're all looking to get out of Star Citizen. Without these tools, I don't think the game would be possible at the scale that we all want it at. Well, most of us want it at. So, cool. Glad this popped up on my feed this morning. Hope you enjoyed watching it with me. I'll let y'all go. Thanks all. have a great one. We'll see you back here soon. Like I said, there's going to be another video coming out very soon. My intent is to get it out Sunday evening. Hopefully I'll make that. But if not, it'll be shortly after. I'm going to be talking a lot more about the development time that Star Citizen has endured. And it's such a hot topic in the community, has been forever. And I kind of addressed this very mildly way back in the first video I ever published to this channel that started this whole fascinating, awesome, amazing journey. So yeah, look forward to getting that out there and hope you all enjoy that. We'll chat soon and enjoy.